Welcome back to week 4 of Red Brick Recap. Week 4, it's been crazy. We've been going for a month now, Ted. How about that? Who would have thought?
That's something else, man. Holy moly.
All right, we got a lot to talk about this week, so let's jump right in. First of all, we have a special guest this week, our second guest episode. Welcome on to the podcast, Joe Zak. Joe, if you don't mind just introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, all that good stuff.
Can do. As he said, I'm Joe Zak. I'm from Minnesota. I'm a senior here at Miami, and I'm studying journalism and sport comm. And then I'm the sport contact for the women's soccer team here.
All right. Well, we brought Joe on this week to talk about what has been historically one of Miami's most successful, most popular sports on campus, and that's the Miami hockey team. I'll be the first to admit I know nothing about hockey or collegiate hockey in general. I follow the NHL as much as I can, but I can't say I'm super in tune. I can name about 5 players from my own team, and that's about it. But yeah, so we got Joe on as our resident Miami hockey expert. Yeah, a lot to be excited about this year, right? Whole different ecosystem, a new coach, lots of new faces. Off rip, but like, what are the big things you're excited about going into the season?
I mean, yeah, you hit it on the head with new coach. Bergeron was here for 5 years, and finally got let go. We bring in Anthony Noreen from the USHL. He's been there since 2017-18. He was the GM and head coach of Tri-City, and then 2019 that role changed to president of hockey operations. And this dude wins. He's 3-time coach of the year in the USHL, set a bunch of records team-wise, had a couple league-wise. International pedigree. He's been in and around USA Hockey for 10 years, I believe. He's been the head coach of different USA teams. He's coached 3 times at the World Junior A Challenge, most recently in 2022-23, and he even won the challenge in 2018-19. And then he also was a coach at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup not too long ago. He has coached college hockey before. It was D3 at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, so he has some college experience. And then he even coached in the ECHL with the Solar Bears, which is like, if you think about it, it's NHL, AHL, and then ECHL. So he's probably seen some of those like younger college guys going through before getting developed and maybe going up to the AHL or even the NHL. And then lots of transfers. This was a big season for transfers. Makes sense. You get a new coaching staff in there. You're going to see a lot of new faces in and around the building. I think there was a lot of exciting ones. 3 big ones from the Big East. We brought in someone from BC, from Northeastern, and from Quinnipiac. We now have 2 guys on the roster that have won the Frozen Four, which I think that's a big deal. If you're going into a season where you're playing a lot of top-end talent, you need guys who have been in and around there. They've won some things. And I think, Big East, that's a big competitive division. They know what it takes to win. They're on good teams. They had a good supporting cast, and they bring some of that experience here. Held on to some good returners. I think Ryquist and Moulton coming back to the team. I think that's going to be some good senior leadership there on the back end. Those are some good defensive guys that we got to keep around. And you bring back 2 familiar faces. Nick Donato's coming back. He was on the team. He just missed out last year, maybe 2 years. And Brian Silver's coming back. He was at Augustana, I think. And then very senior-laden team. I was going through that roster. I couldn't believe how many juniors, seniors, graduate students I was looking at. There's not a lot of freshmen or sophomores on this team. There's a lot of experience here. And I think that's going to be a key part going into this season. Is there was a real big freshman class 2 years ago. Now these guys are all juniors. A lot of them are still here. I think there's only been 1 or 2 that have moved on. I think a lot of them are ready to take that step. They're ready to play top-end minutes. A lot of them are ready to move into those special teams units. I think, although we lost some very effective players, some graduates, some moved to different conferences. Just looking at 3 of the names that I pointed out, Drasner moved to Western Michigan. Going to be someone you play in your own conference at some point. He played 115 games here. That's a lot of experience on the back end. Kumlin, who was a part of that big freshman class a little while ago, he moves to Notre Dame. He had 22 points in 66 games, playing top minutes every now and then, playing special teams. would have been a guy you like to see stick around, but Notre Dame was also one of those hockey programs hard to not look at and be a little jealous that he gets to go there. And then Thomas Daskis, one of the older guys, he went to Michigan for this season. He big brooding forward, big guy, loves throwing hits, loves being physical up there. Wasn't as big of a point scorer, 20 points in 93 games, but a lot of guys that moved on from this team that had been here for quite some time. You have graduates with PJ Fletcher, Barbolini, Eaton, and your captain, Clement. They're all gone. So this is going to be kind of a new look team, new look coach. It's a bigger roster. They expanded from 27 to 30 this year. If you look at some of the sizes, I think the team, although it's minor, team got a little lighter, a little bit smaller. The average height went down from 6'1" to just under 6 foot, and the average weight dropped about 5 pounds. So I mean, maybe the style's adapting from a bit more of a physical presence on the ice to more of a skillful, hey, we're going to be a little bit quicker kind of team. I mean, not a lot to complain about there. Sizes and everything in hockey, there's going to be plenty of times where skill is a lot more useful. This is a very talented conference we're in. This is arguably the most talented conference in college hockey.
Yeah, I want to bring in Ted here for a second to talk about like the student perspective. I remember like when I was thinking about coming to college, Miami hockey was one of the biggest selling points, saying like we have these big game days, we have this fantastic hockey team, and over the last couple of years, I think it's kind of gone by the wayside. I think that students have kind of moved away from the hockey team. Like frankly, we haven't been very good. We have not competed in the NCHC. There's been games that students have gone to that have ended 5-0, 6-0. So I think I can speak from my perspective, and I want to get Ted. I want to get your opinion on this too. But I think bringing this hockey team back into like a national spotlight would do a lot of good for Miami athletics as a whole and just campus life around athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. My older sister went to Miami, and one of the big selling points that they used to talk about all the time was the hockey games are so much fun. Everybody packs the house. There's students doing all these different chants. It's so much fun. It's the only sport that like people really attended. And basically, since my freshman year, since Joe and I got here, because we're both seniors, the attendance has dwindled. Now, I believe last year there is a group of students who have tried their best to bring hockey back. There's one guy who dresses in an all red like bodysuit. He waves a flag. He tries to start the chants, and that's something that you definitely want to see more of. It's just how do we get people back to the games? And simply put, it's winning, right? It's winning. We saw it with the Cincinnati football game this year. We won the game last year. Now it's on our home turf, and students packed the house. So it's all about winning, unfortunately. And I mean, the Miami hockey team hasn't won over 10 games since 2018. Like that's not a recipe for success right there. If and like Joe mentioned, they play in an incredibly tough conference. It's not like any night is an easy night.
Right.
So it's just about building the program back up. I think in our time at Miami, we may not be able to see a 10-win season. Who knows? Hopefully they blow my expectations out of the water this year. But hopefully 2, 3, 4 years down the line, it's not only a 10-win season, but it's a competitive 500 or above 500 type seasons.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my expectations aren't super high, but I want to get your guys' opinion. What is the expectation for this team this season? Joe, you mentioned this is an experienced team, not a whole lot of freshmen and sophomores, a lot of experience, a lot of playing time on the ice. What is your expectation going into this season of what this team should be able to achieve?
You look at that non-conference schedule, not a lot of good teams in there. A lot of teams that were like 300, 350 and below. And a lot of them are at home. I think there's only 3 out of the 10 games are on the road. I think this is, a great test for Noreen to come in with this new squad and maybe build up some confidence. You got a lot of home games, potentially a lot of wins in there. I could see 7 or 8 wins in non-conference fairly easily with how experienced this team is. And, just frankly, some of these teams aren't that good. Like Lindenwood has only had a hockey program for 3 years. And I think the opening weekend's going to be a fun one for them. They get to go down to Ferris State, their old CCHA rival. It's been touted by Everything College Hockey as their college hockey game day, that's going to be a loud house on that Friday night and probably Saturday too. But, you know, your opening game, you get to go into a fun environment, good success against them. Every year you win one and then you like lose in an overtime or a shootout against them. There's a lot on the table here in non-conference before you go into this conference schedule, which every team in the preseason is ranked other than us. You know, that's a tough look when in the top 20, your entire conference is in there and you know you got to play a lot of them 2 at least 4 times, you know?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what opening weekend in Oxford's going to look like because it's mid-October. I don't think people know that the hockey's starting this early. I think it kind of gets mixed in with like basketball, which doesn't start until next month. I don't think there's a whole lot of, at least I haven't seen a whole lot of publicity around the team this year. So I'm interested to see how packed the house is for that Friday night game against Anchorage.
Yeah.
Which, in theory, that should be a pretty sold out crowd on a Friday night at 7 o'clock. That should be prime hours to get people in the stands.
Not necessarily, because that is fall break. That's the first day of fall break for students. So that weekend may not be as packed as we think, but at least, yeah, I mean, it's a tough start for them because that is a game that you would want to have the house packed, and then their next game isn't until a Thursday, and who knows how many students are showing up on a Thursday night. But that October 25th game against Lindenwood, that should be the packed house we will expect to see, hopefully. But Joe, I think, just nailed it on the head. There are winnable games out of conference for this team. You want this team to have, at minimum, 6 wins going into conference play. That remains to be seen. I want to see how the chemistry evolves over time. As Joe mentioned, very, very top-heavy senior and junior laden team, but how much of their experience and how much of their chemistry can they build in such a short time before October 4th? I mean, it's October 2nd. How much of that off-season training has resulted in a lot of chemistry for them? So it'll be interesting to see, but I have hope for Noreen and his staff and what they've been able to accomplish so far.
I think something that'll help the chemistry too is Noreen's coached 3 of these guys at Tri-City. Real good experience with them. And to be honest, a lot of these guys played in the USHL. Noreen would have had to coach against them on their teams, and they would have seen how Noreen teams play. So I think there will be at least some familiarity with how he wants to play. There's some guys who already know how he wants to play. Hopefully he's leaning on them to like teach him the framework for how this team's going to be successful. And you just want to be receptive as a junior and senior. Like, you've only got a couple more years at this. I think there is some really exciting guys in there. I'm going to highlight some in a little bit, but you'd hope that they get it by now. They've been in the college hockey program for a while. Just take everything in like a sponge and go out there and play on opening weekend.
Yeah, I want to kind of go back to like our conference and the fact that the NCHC is as good as it is, as dominant as it is. What would you guys consider? I know nothing about college hockey, so you could tell me 0 wins, you could tell me win every game, and I'd probably believe you. But what is a realistic expectation for this conference schedule? Like, what would you guys be happy walking away with this season with win-wise?
I had it in here a little later. You get to play 3 of the worst teams 4 times. You get Omaha, Western, and University of Minnesota Duluth. They're currently the 15, 17, and 18 in the rankings. You get to play them all in 2 series. That's, if you're going to get any favorable picks, you don't have to play at North Dakota this year. You get to host Denver later on in the year when maybe you get to figure some more things out. Omaha, Michigan, and University of Minnesota Duluth. Last year, Duluth was not that good. Duluth, I don't think, even got ranked for very long. They were really floundering around last year. Western's another team. You know, going to Western's a tough place to go. You've had decent success at playing them here. You know, that was, I believe, the one win last year was Western at home. You can argue, you know, we played ASU them moving to the NCHC won one of those games too. So I guess we kind of won 2 NCHC games last year. But I mean, you kind of have a favorable schedule this year. Looking at it on paper, like obviously not easy, but you get to play 3 of the lowest ranked teams 4 times. Hopefully you can split those series. Maybe at least get 1 win and maybe like an overtime loss in there. I would say the expectation would be 5 to 7 wins. If you come out of non-conference looking really strong, you get 6 to 8 wins in non-conference, and hopefully you just kind of build on it. Like Noreen has proven he's got a lot of success where he goes. He kind of understands the portal, I'm hoping, based on being president of hockey operations and being the head coach. He can hopefully balance out, here's what we're going to do in the portal, here's what we want to do on ice. And I think he can really build something here, and I think 5 wins would be a good expectation.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to say 4 to 6 coming out of conference play, just because you don't know what teams can get hot, especially late in the season when we tend to host some of those smaller or lower teams, I should say. But I think if you 4 to 6, 5 to 7, depending on how the team gels. I think Joe's right when he said if you come out of non-conference play with 6 to 8 wins and then you're expecting another 5 to 7 conference, if you come out with 4 or 5 wins in non-conference play, you should expect about 4 to 6 conference wins. But who knows? At the end of the day, who knows? The NCHC is one of those conferences where you can expect the team to win Friday and Saturday, and then all of a sudden Saturday is a day where the game is a lot closer than it should be. It's coming down to the wire. I at least like Saturday games more than Friday night games, just because those games, in my experience, have tended to be closer. They have tended to be these games where you might see it go into overtime. So I think 4 to 6, 5 to 7 is a good area of where we should expect to see the Red Hawks in conference play.
Yeah, quick apology to all of our audio listeners out there. It's noon in Oxford, which means it's a time to test the emergency sirens. Why they do it during the middle of the day when everyone's in work and have class, I don't know, but one of the many mysteries of this town. But yeah, Joe, you mentioned a little earlier you had some players you want to highlight. Do you want to dive into those guys and give us an idea of what to expect from them?
Yeah, so first one I had right away on the top of the list, Colby Ambrosio, coming from Boston College. They played last year in the Frozen Four. He's going to be a grad student. He's played 138 games. He's gotten 66 points at BC, which is a great program, 28 goals, 38 assists. He was a top 5 in shooting every year on BC. Guy's going to get pucks to the net. I think last year's team, they could get a little cute at times with it. They would make one too many passes and they'd miss a chance or two. So I think if you have a guy that's, just going to shoot the puck, give him the puck and let him do it. He was a 4th round pick by the Avalanche in 2020. Clearly a lot of talent there. If he was able to get drafted, I think that would have been about his freshman year or just before. He's one of the guys that played under Noreen before. He was at Tri-City with him. He got 26 goals and 50 points in 48 games, and he recorded 38 goals and 36 assists for 74 points in 105 games in the USHL. Very comparable to his college stats. I think, in juniors, it might be a slightly easier, but I think if anything, that shows he's grown in college, that he's getting similar stats to what he was getting in juniors, where competition level honestly does rise a lot. And then another one of the transfers, I think I'm going to say this right, is Christoph Filion from Quinnipiac. He's another grad student, played a lot of games, 124 games, 25 goals, 29 assists, 54 points at Quinnipiac. They're another team in that Big East. They won the NCAA Frozen Four in 22-23, coming off a career high in goals, and he nearly matched his career high in points last season. So he's coming in kind of on a high, coming in with a lot of experience, and he's now one of the 2 guys that has won the Frozen Four before, and I think that's going to be valuable for this team, that you got guys who can win.
Yeah, Ted, any other players that you're looking at? I mean, I understand that there's a lot of talent coming in. I'm not really sure what to make of it. I'm trying my best to understand hockey, and I'm still kind of falling short. So, Ted, if there's any players you want to highlight as well, please feel free.
Yeah, I guess I just want to look at the goaltending for a second. Bruno Rivera's freshman last year. He's returning for his sophomore season. He was pretty good, all things considered, for a freshman last year. Obviously, he had really big shoes to fill with the loss of Ludwig Pearson. And I want to say Logan Neaton didn't play a ton last year, if I remember correctly. Joe, correct me on
Yeah,
that.
I think he was hurt for a spell in there, and so he got, a majority of his minutes during that time. But I agree. I think he impressed.
Yeah, Bruno, he's played 15 games, started 14 of them as a true freshman. He had a 4.16 goals against average, and that seems a little high for what you want it to be. But again, A, he's a freshman, and B, he was dropped in probably one of the toughest conferences in all of college hockey. So he was kind of thrown right into the fire as a freshman. He had an 86 save percentage, really not bad whatsoever. So he really impressed towards the middle and the end of the season. He got more comfortable as he went on, and that's something you really want to see from your goaltender. So I expect Bruno to have a really big year, considering that there's really no one else on this roster who can be threatening to take his starting role away. There's a freshman, Ethan Dolmier, but again, he's a freshman. You have the graduate student in Brett Miller, who just transferred in. He's from RPI. We'll see if Noreen decides to split time between Miller and Riveris, but I expect Riveris to have a very big workload this year.
All right, we're coming up on our time here, so I want to close out with one big picture question. So for both of you, if you're trying to sell this Miami hockey season to someone like me or to a student who's never really watched hockey or college hockey before, what are you telling them about Miami hockey this season? What are you saying to get them fired up for what's going to come over the next couple months?
You want to take this one first?
Yeah. I think it's going to be the word that just keeps percolating in my head is kind of hopeful and fun. This is a brand new team. This is not teams of years past. So Jack, especially for you who has been here through the Bergeron regime, this is not a Chris Bergeron team where Miami's only scoring 1 to 2 goals a night and letting in 6. This feels like a team that's going to be a bit of a higher scoring offense, especially with some of the transfers that Joe has been naming. So this team has a sense of fun to it. And maybe it seems, even though you think of it, a new coach coming in, maybe it's a rebuilding year, but competitiveness, I guess, is something that I think this team is going to have. They're going to have a kind of gritty edge to them where, look, like Joe said, they're the only team that's not ranked in the NCHC. They want to prove that they can compete with the big dogs in their conference. So they're going to have a gritty edge to them. And I think it's going to be you're going to have a much different vibe to the team this year. You're not going to expect them to go out on Friday, Saturday night, get their teeth kicked in. You would expect them to, if they're going to get their teeth kicked in, they're going to pull a few hairs, punch a few faces on the way down.
Joe, anything to add?
I think you hit the nail on the head there a lot. I mean, I think the motto might honestly be why not? This team honestly shouldn't have any expectations. New staff, a lot of new faces. You've got some great talent on there. I was going to touch on Waldron and Vitolin's coming back. Waldron just had career highs in nearly every category. Vitolin's kind of got hurt, had a lot of limited games. 17 points in 28 games. That was pretty impressive as someone who had just stepped into that team, and he had international experience. And I mean, Noreen wins. This guy, I believe he's got 235 career wins in the USHL, 236. And he set the league record for points 3 years ago. If he can just start instilling some of the groundwork, I don't think this team's going to, blow anyone's minds away. But I think this team's got to be competitive. I think there was a lot of close games last year. You look at North Dakota at home, you're winning with a minute 20 left. And all of a sudden that team gets a late goal and then they go on and win it in overtime. I think the thing that Noreen's got to hammer on these guys is just don't let it slip late. Because there was 3, 4, 5 games last year, you're winning late in the third period and it just slips away from you. And I think he's going to be able to bring that to this team. So it's like, why not go out there and see new team giving it their all under a coach that, frankly, just kind of wins.
Yeah, and Jack, before we close out, I just want to mention one thing that Joe brought up is the idea of why not us. There's no like Joe said, there's no expectations for this team. I think they're going to play a lot freer than they did last year because Bergeron was coaching for his job, quite frankly. He knew he was on the ropes, and he's trying to coach for his job, and his players know that he's coaching for his job. So there's a lot of expectations to win and keep this guy around because there's a lot of uncertainty to who comes in next. Do I transfer? Do I stay if I'm a player, right? So I think this year they're going to play a lot freer. They're going to have a lot. There's not a ton of expectations for this team. It's just to build and to grow. So I think this is going to be a much, much different team.
And it should have a more exciting style. I know Bergeron was known for the dump and chase, which is not the most attractive hockey in the world.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you on later on this season as we get closer to as we move through hockey season, and we look forward to that. You can find him at his there under his face right there at Joe Zak Photography. Yeah, Ted's got it. Joe, anything you want to say before we transition on to football?
No, just glad to talk hockey. Hopefully there'll be a lot more to talk about, a lot of highlights instead of lowlights this year, and should just be an exciting year for Miami hockey to try and get back to some of that glory they had in the late 2000s and the mid 2010s.
All right, thank you so much for coming on, Joe. We'll see you soon.
Appreciate it.
Bye, Joe.
All right, let's talk about the UMass game.
The not fun stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Let's move to the not fun stuff now. Ooh, where to even begin with this game?
Jack, start us off.
Yeah, I put it in my notes here. I want to rant for a second. I was really disappointed with the turnout from the fans, mostly on Saturday. It was our homecoming game. And especially coming off the Cincy game where there was 24,000 people in the stands. I wasn't expecting a Cincinnati type turnout. That was a once in a decade event in Miami. I get that. But I think 10 minutes before kickoff, I counted 80 people on the student side. 80 people at our homecoming game. I get it was rainy. I get it's UMass. I get it's not the most attractive football that we're playing this year. I get we're not the 10-1 team we were last year. But that's just embarrassing. Like when the ESPN coverage started, it panned to show our stadium that was maybe 10% full. It was frankly it was a gut punch. Like it sucked all of, if there was any to begin with, atmosphere out of that place. So it was a tough watch. I mean, I think it showed on the field. I think that there was no. I've been playing college football a lot lately, so I'm going to say stadium pulse. There's no stadium pulse for this team to build off. There was no atmosphere. There was no connection with what was happening on the field and what was happening in the stands. And I think that was after the Cincinnati game. I had high hopes for what could have been at this game, and I was left completely dumbfounded by how absent it was.
Yeah, I think there were more people who went to the Notre Dame game than went to the actual home game on Miami's campus, which it's disappointing, but as you brought up, it's a reality that this team has faced for years. Even when we were 10-1 last year, we weren't packing the stands like we did for the Cincinnati game. And it's frustrating from a student media perspective because it's like, what are they playing for? It's like, who is this team playing for? They're playing for themselves, obviously. They're playing for their families, but they're not playing for any of the students. It doesn't seem like any of the students really care. And it's unfortunate, but I don't really see a way to fix that, right? Because it's something the team has faced for years. And I want to say part of it is just the location of Yager Stadium. The fact that it's all the way down the hill on the other side of campus, at least for kids who are a part of Western campus, like my freshman year, walking all the way to Yager Stadium and back. that's a half-hour walk.
It's a hike. Yeah.
It's a hike. And I always hear about from these alumni, the old stadium used to be in the middle of campus. They used to all congregate to the middle of campus. And I think that's what Miami is sorely missing. They're missing I don't think the location of Jaeger is great because if you're in the middle of campus on a Saturday, like you go to the middle of campus, boom, there's a football stadium. The tickets are free. Might as well go for a little bit. But if you have to go to Jaeger, I think people take the easy excuse of like, oh, it's too far. I'll just watch on TV.
Yeah, I think especially with the weather being how it was. I mean, I can't emphasize just how gross it was out there. It was nasty. You did not want to spend more than 5 minutes outside. I mean, it made it impossible to do any sort of like sideline stuff because if I pulled out my camera or my phone for more than 5 minutes, I was risking water damage.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that yes, if hypothetically if we put Jaeger in the middle of campus, it might alleviate some of that problem. But I mean, how much closer can you really get? Is my thing. Like, yes, Jaeger's far, and yes, in the grand scheme of the scale of Oxford, for some students, yes, it's a long walk. But that long walk is still 20 minutes. If this was an SEC football program, no one's complaining about a 20-minute walk. Obviously, we're not. Obviously, the situation is very different. But I also come back to like, you can't have it both ways. We can't have this mega stadium that can fit 24,000 people like we saw for the Cincinnati game and have it in the middle of campus. You can't have both, or you can,
Yeah.
but you'd have to drastically alter the campus, which I don't think right now Miami's in any position to do, and I'm not going to sit here and advocate for it because, frankly, who am I to talk?
Exactly. And yeah, you can't have it both ways. You're right. SEC schools are a lot different. Most kids are walking half hour to get to the games, but again, that's an SEC school. Those are there's something about the SEC atmosphere that even if your team stinks, like, even if you're a bad SEC school, people are still showing up to your games. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how to fix the fans. Obviously, if somebody did, we would have it figured out by now. But I think it's just it's a tough spot for Miami football to be in. But let's move on from the fans and let's start talking about the actual football, which was a little tough to watch. And
I'm gonna say I'm not sure we're going from a negative to a negative here. Like,
yeah, Jack, you were obviously at the game. In the notes, you have what in the world was that? So let's break it down. What in the world was that?
I mean, it was such a seesaw of a game where for the first half, pretty much first half, it felt like there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Miami was going to win this football game. It just felt like it was a matter of time. There was going to be a big play that happened that stretched the lead, and Miami would walk away with the win. And then as the third quarter rolled on and got into the fourth quarter, you suddenly start to think, oh, we have to seriously consider the reality that Miami loses this football game and enters MAC play 0-4. And especially on that last drive where I think UMass was on like the 35 with like 2 minutes to go, and we held them to a field goal. But, you're giving the ball to the Miami offense, which frankly hasn't been good all season, with 44 seconds on the clock to get, let's call it 65 yards. That is far from a foregone conclusion. There was a very high chance that Miami walks away from this game with a loss.
And remember the last time, sorry to cut you off, but the last time that Miami had to drive down the field was in Evanston, Illinois, and Gabbert threw an interception, and he had already thrown an interception in this game. So you're right, it was not a foregone conclusion. It was not something that people thought was going to be achievable.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to like the attendance, but like I would have been very interested to see what the atmosphere would have been like in that stadium if it had been even halfway full. Because at least from my vibe and the vibe I was getting from people around me was, this is not good. This is DEFCON 1. This is DEFCON 5. Like we're starting to get seriously concerned about how this football team's going to look this year. And before we say anything else, huge credit to Dom Jobin. 2 massive kicks for a first-year starting kicker to basically win your homecoming game at home in front of your home fans, we'll call it that. But that's a huge spot to step into, and he handled it, I thought, perfectly, about as well as anyone could.
Yeah. Jobin, I'll go down to our notes on him. You said it best. Jobin has been biding his time behind Graham Nicholson. I don't know why I was blanking on his name. It's been so long since we talked about him. Literally talked about him last week. But he sat behind Nicholson for 2 years. And when you have to sit behind a Lou Groza award-winning kicker, you're going to pick up some things. And you're going to learn a lot from him. And he was calm, cool, and collected. Whatever you want to say about him, he was that in the game. Because let's think about it for a second. It's raining. It's cold. There's no one at the game. You're about to drop to 0-4 if you miss this kick. Your team had just gotten you all the way down the field, so there's momentum on that side. You have to nail that kick. And then at the end of it all, the UMass kicker misses their kick in overtime, and then you have to nail a game winner to not go to the second overtime. So Jobin stepped up in the biggest way possible, and you single-handedly saved Miami's season. I'll put it out on the line. He saved the season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you're absolutely right. I also, like, Jobin said it in his postgame when he stepped into the press room, like, iron sharpens iron. Sitting behind Grant, like, you are challenged to be a better kicker every single day. And when he gets the opportunity, he's shown it this season. He's been nails this season. He's been really, really good, especially for a guy who hasn't kicked a full season in college football before. Yes, he's missed a couple, but I think that's more down to, like, being pushed out of his range more than, like, he hasn't, from memory, I don't think I've seen him, like, hook one. I haven't seen him push one wide. Like, when he's asked to make a kick from a makeable distance, he's been nails. And I think that's been really impressive to watch. I mean, he won the Lou Groza, like, weekly award this week. I'll be the first one to say it. The Groza runs through Oxford. Runs through Oxford. The kicker you right here.
Kicker you. I mean,
yeah. Shout out Joven. Awesome way to win that football game. Obviously, a little bit of drama never hurt anyone, but there was definitely I would have been a lot more comfortable if it was like a 40-10 win.
Yeah, absolutely. Jobin's kick, that last kick, I will say, was a bit of a knuckler, and it looked like it was gonna ding the left post, but he just tucked it right in.
Hey, it's a home run in the scorebook. That's all that matters. No one remembers how it went in as long as it went.
3 points is 3 points.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the not so fun stuff about this game. The offense, once again, 23 points, season high, did enough to get the win. And I'll give credit where credit's due. Gabbert was able to drive down the field, albeit through checkdowns, to get the game-winning kick, or to get the game-tying kick in position. Credit where credit is due. When the offense needed to step up, it stepped up. But we're now on game 4 where the offense has looked below expectations.
Yeah. The shocking numbers for me are, this is the first game with a 100-yard rusher. First game. Shout out Keon Mosey at 114 yards on the ground, touchdown, high run of 66. But we're 4 games into the season, and we haven't had a guy eclipse 50, much less. So that, to me, is disgusting, frankly. There's no other way to put it. Second of all, 1 of 8 on third downs. When do you think they got that 1 third down conversion?
It wasn't the last drive, was it?
Nope. It was the first drive of the game. The first drive. And part of that goes to the play calling. You're not – I mean, Chuck Martin, there were a couple plays where it's 3rd and 3. The run game hadn't been working, and he goes downing up the middle for a yard, or they get stuffed at the line. And it's like, frankly, it's like, what is the play calling here? Like, how is it – it's just like, we don't have a running game. Why are you trying to run for 3 yards on third down when you have momentum and you need a first down? And I don't even know. I mean, I put it in my notes that Gabbert needs to be better. Like, Gabbert at the end of the day needs to be better. We've talked about it. This is we're sounding like broken records here. Something needs to click. You can't be shaking off the rust anymore. There's no more excuses, frankly. Mm-hmm. But part of the blame falls on Chuck Martin. This is something that I've noticed just watching the games, and then I've heard about it from people who are around the team and in practices. Gabbert doesn't get chewed out like the rest of the players. Martin does not chew him out when he makes a mistake. If you watch after the interception, Martin, he's pissed because obviously the ball got turned over. But when Gabbert comes to the sideline, he's not yelling at him. He's kind of just being like, Brett, you got to be better. But meanwhile, Dylan Downing, he's not getting blocking. And he runs up the middle for a yard on third down. And all of a sudden, you just see Chuck Martin losing his mind on the sidelines, screaming at him. And I just wonder, like, I understand that Brett is a 6-year senior. You've been with this kid for 6 years now, but he has to be better. His interception, you can't throw the ball in the double coverage like that.
Yeah, just a couple things about that. One, like I don't think it's about being like chewed out. I think it's like at some point you just have to put your trust in your 6-year quarterback. And yeah, maybe he doesn't get chewed out, fine, but he's been here 6 years. He knows what Martin wants to do. And yes, it hasn't worked as well this year, but I don't hate the fact that he still has trust in his quarterback. I think if anything, that's a sign that this team's not exactly at panic stations yet, which I think is a good sign. Two, Gabbert was very, very adamant in the post game that he needs to be better. He knows it. And I will say that this week, I thought at least it was somewhat better than it was against Notre Dame. It was a better performance. I thought he hit some nice throws. He had some nice throws over the middle, especially to Javon Tracy. He had a nice fade route. There were signs that things are moving in the right direction. Is it as good as it needs to be as we get into MAC play? No, probably not. But there are signs that things are working. And obviously, yes, the interception was it's a tough look. Like that's a bad cross-body throw into double coverage. Fine. And yes, those mistakes probably shouldn't happen from a 6-year quarterback, but it didn't kill them today. Maybe it kills them in a MAC game later on. But to me, there were some encouraging things, even if it didn't all get put together on Saturday. There were some positives to take away from it, even if there is still a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I know what Brett can be. I know what this offense can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of just – I'm like the kid from Incredibles who's on the tricycle and he sees Mr. Incredible. And I'm like – he's like, well, what are you waiting for? I don't know, something amazing, I guess. And I'm just waiting for that amazing moment, right? Because we know we've seen it before. We can see Gabbert being that guy.
Yeah.
But he throws the ball, it's right before halftime. He throws the ball into double coverage across his body behind the wide receiver, interception in the end zone. It's the one in the Cincinnati game. He throws it up to cold iron double coverage. It's why does that keep happening? And when is it going to be fixed?
The other thing I want to go back to, and I know we talked about this briefly, I guess in the last 2 weeks we talked about it briefly. The situation that Miami is in right now is again, not to suggest benching Brett at all, but do you really have a better option than Brett on the field? Like,
I don't think you do.
Are you putting the offense in Henry Hessen's hands, who's played 2 drives this season and started basically a monsoon bowl game? Are you putting the ball in his hands? Are you putting the ball in Alex Cops, who's played a half of college football for Miami? Like, I don't see a way that like another quarterback fixes the frankly many problems there are on offense.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there is no one solution that's gonna fix this. There are too many holes in the offense right now to plug in a quarterback and say, okay, boom, our offense is fixed. Let's go win some football games. When Gabbert would get injured in the last couple of years, you felt comfortable putting the ball in AJ Mayer's hands or Avion Smith's hands. You felt really comfortable with that. But now it's like okay, we gotta make sure Brett stays healthy, or else our season's kind of screwed. Because is Hessen the answer? Is Kopp the answer? Is it someone we haven't even seen yet? Right. So yeah, there are too many. Yeah, there are too many holes to fix, and I think the biggest hole right now is the health of Colby Borders on the offensive line. Their offensive line has already been kind of struggling this year, and you bring back 3 returners, including Borders, and now Borders gets injured. Now, they replace him with a very capable offensive lineman, and I'm forgetting his name at this point. I think it's Smith Jr. I know he has like a junior on the back of his jersey, 72, I think the number is. Forgetting his name, I apologize. But Borders is someone who knows this team inside and out because of his experience and time at Miami. So the health of Kofi Borders, I hope Colby's okay. I hope he makes a return. But you're right. There's a lot of holes and a lot of questions, and we got to figure out the answers sooner than later because coming up is MAC play.
Yeah, you were right. It's Gregory Smith Jr.
Gregory Smith Jr.
Yeah, 74. And before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about the defense before we move on. Close with looking at Toledo. It's the big plays again. It's the same thing as it was all season. It's the defense 90% of the time looks great. The run game 90% of the time was stopped. The pass game 90% of the time was completely taken away. But the big plays, once again, the long downfield pass to Keeney James. Like, that's a big play that was on one-on-one coverage with no high safety help, if I remember correctly. That's a 7-point swing when in reality you probably could have got off the field with a scoreless hold there. So it's the big plays like that I think are, once again, really doing damage for Miami.
Yeah, the defense looks good for, call it, it's 15-minute quarters, so it's an hour game. They look good for 48 to 50 minutes a game, even 55 minutes a game. But it's those 5 little minutes where the big chunk plays start to hurt them, and those are the 5 minutes they get beat, and the 5 minutes they lose games. So I think you're right. The defense is looking really, really good, but in those minutes where those chunk plays happens, they do not look like the what we said is going to win them games this year. At the beginning of the year, we said the defense is going to keep them in games, and they have, but it's those chunk plays that really kill them.
Well, I think the defense really has been keeping us in games. I mean, if you look at our record so far this year, and then you pulled Notre Dame to less than 20, you hold Cincinnati, who's Big 12 is known for their offense, to 27. You hold a Notre Dame team who's really good and is going to be probably back in the top 15, top 10 in the coming weeks, to 28. Again, in a not so very close game, granted, but 28 points is still 28 points at Notre Dame. That's not something to shy away from. And this week was kind of an anomaly where I think the weather really played a factor and the big plays helped. But their defense is putting them in positions to win games.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, the offense needs to catch up. I know we've talked about the offense at length, so I'm not going to go back into it. But I think the defense has been very good. And, I mean, I wrote it down later on. We did our, MVPs. I think the secondary, and Silas Walters especially, has been really, really good. And I know Eli Blakey's also been a big part of that. He didn't play on Saturday, but this secondary has been really good about taking away the pass. And the run defense has been iffy, but the pass defense, in my opinion, has been really good.
Yeah, Silas Walters, you said it best. He stepped up. He was mainly a special teams guy last year, and now he's stepping into the starting safety roles, filling in for Sterling Weatherford, who was all MAC contention for safety, and stepping in for Michael Dowell, who was all MAC contention. Like, those are 2 big names on the Miami secondary to fill, and Walters has stepped up and been very good. Ryan Strader, he's not the lockdown that we kind of expected him to be, but he still hasn't been bad. It was a tough look when he got beat on the one-on-one coverage, but we've mentioned it that the wear and tear is starting to catch up for him. He got dinged, he got his bell rung on the field goal block, and hopefully he's okay. He didn't return to the game, but I think the wear and tear is getting to him a little bit. I think having to play more physical when he's a smaller cornerback against some of these bigger name schools, I think having to face Notre Dame and then go to UMass in back-to-back weeks isn't really fun for anyone. So I don't think there's any reason to be concerned with the Miami secondary. And my MVP was, the easy answer would have been Matt Solopek. He's leading the team in tackles again. No shocker there. He's averaging 9 tackles a game. He's got 36 right now. He's on pace. Yeah, they play 11, 12 games. He's on pace for about 108 sacks this year, which first time in Miami history that somebody would have 100 tackles in 4 consecutive seasons, if that happens. So, but the one that I picked ended up being Brian Ugu. He has been a menace on the outside edge, being an outside rusher. The stats don't scream at you like, say, Ty Wise or Matt Solopek. He's got 21 tackles, 5 TFLs, and a sack, which, by the way, the sack wasn't in the UMass game. It was in that Notre Dame game.
Mm-hmm.
He was to get pressure on Riley Leonard. But it just seems like he's been everywhere. He's also got that one big forced fumble too. I think it was it the Cincinnati game?
I think it was it the goal line against Northwestern?
I think so. It was either him or that might have been Kobe Hilton, one of the two. But regardless, he does have a forced fumble on the year, and it was a big forced fumble at that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just been everywhere. It seems like every play, the announcers are calling up Ryan Ugu with another tackle. Ryan Ugu with another tackle. He's just been everywhere. So I really think our defense is going to be fine, especially getting the MAC play when they I don't know if it's just me, but they tend to step it up. They tend to take it to a whole other level in MAC play.
Well, speaking of MAC play, we got 10 minutes left, so I want to get to Toledo before we get out of here. This is probably going to be one of the toughest MAC games we play this year, going to Toledo, playing at the Glass Bowl against a Toledo team that is, as expected, looks really darn good. I mean, they beat an SEC team, and the other two wins haven't been as impressive, but an SEC win and winning games they're supposed to, it's a good resume to have. And I mean, I wrote it down here, like Tucker Gleason is a quarterback that this season has beaten the style of quarterback that has beaten Miami this season, where it's a dual threat, a guy who can beat you on the ground and through the air, doesn't turn the ball over a lot, really, really protective with the football, really smart with his throws, 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. I think he's going to be the X factor in this week. I think that if anyone's going to beat Miami, it is going to be the guy under center.
You said it best. Tucker Gleason is exactly the quarterback that Miami hates to see. They have not been really every quarterback really they face has been a dual threat quarterback. I know Brendan Sorsby didn't run a whole lot in their game, but we still considered him a dual threat quarterback, and we haven't really seen a quote unquote pocket passer thus far this year. So I think it's kind of just making Gleason throw the ball, making him beat you with his arms, not running a lot and allowing running lanes for the running backs to open up. Losing Penny Boone has been really tough for Toledo, as it says in our notes. It's a running back by committee so far.
Mm-hmm.
So losing Penny Boone hurts, but this is why I love the MAC, right? Toledo beat Mississippi State at home, and they beat the brakes off of them, frankly. It was 41-21 or 41-12 or something like that. Exactly. It wasn't like it was a game-winning field goal. But then they turn around and they lose to Western Kentucky, which is a Conference USA team. That's the joy of the MAC. It's the same thing with Northern Illinois. They go and they beat Notre Dame, and then they turn around and they lose to Buffalo.
Yeah, and I think this is, I mean, I don't want to, get ahead of myself, but if Miami wins this game, then the season is well and truly back on. At 2-3 and 1-0 in the conference, that's momentum. Now we're on a streak. You build that going into MAC play. I know we've talked about every MAC game Miami has this year is tough. Miami plays a lot of tough teams, and we'll have to really battle to get hypothetically back to Detroit. But it starts here. I know Coach Martin said last week in their press conference that they don't take the losses away, and they are still a 1-3 team. But 1-0 in the conference tells a completely different story than the rest of the season does. And I think that a win on Saturday completely changes the trajectory of this season.
I think the key for Miami for the rest of the season is to know that they're playing with their season on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they lose another game, there's no chance they're making it to Detroit. So they have to take every game, one game at a time, 60 minutes at a time. They're playing with their backs against the wall. And we talked about it last week. We're talking about it again here. There is no easy game for Miami remaining on the schedule. But it's also all of these games are incredibly winnable games. And it's not just because it's the MAC. It's because the MAC has a lot of parity. There's no one team that we think is going to run away with the conference.
Right.
It's been shown. Toledo, we know Toledo's a powerhouse with Jason Candle at the helm, but they lost to Western Kentucky. They can easily lose to another MAC team. So all of these games are incredibly winnable.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion on this. I think that to win against Toledo, on Saturday, two things need to happen. One, the run game needs to be established early. If we can get Keon Mosey working in the early downs, get him broken out for a couple big gains, and then go to guys like Dylan Downing in the short yardage situations who can power through and get a yard or two. If you can get that going early, I think it opens up a world of different possibilities for Brett on offense. Secondly, I think we need to get Brett comfortable in the pocket early. Get him throwing some short hitches, get him throwing short slants, get that bubble screen that was working with Cade McDonald a couple weeks ago back working. Get those little short gains working, and then you open up the top. You open up taking the top off a little bit more. So I think that if you get those two things working on offense, then I think this is a very winnable ball game.
Yeah, I'll say I agree completely with what you're saying. I think the ball needs to start going to Keon Mosey more. He proved it in that UMass game that he needs more touches. I think part of it is that his leg, he's 5'7", but his legs never stop moving. Mm-hmm. There were a couple plays where he'd get stuck at the line, and then all of a sudden he pops out of the scrum for another 3-4 yards. Or there was a play where he was caught behind the first down line. I think it was second down, and he just kept chugging and broke a couple tackles, and then all of a sudden it's a 15-yard gain from Keon Mosey. So I think getting him involved is going to help the offense more. I think taking away – I don't want to say taking away touches, but I think these little like jet sweeps with Kevin Davis, they haven't proved to be effective this year. Last year they were pretty effective. I remember in the MAC championship game, Kevin Davis had a huge like jet sweep for 20-25 yards. Well, this year they just haven't proven to be effective, and I think they need to start moving away and start putting the ball in Keon Mosey's hands, and then in those short yardages, getting it to Dylan Downing, involving Jordan Brunson maybe a little bit more too. We haven't seen a whole lot of him this year, so I think that's going to be the recipe for success on the run game. And then for the passing game, absolutely right. Get the ball out of Brett's hands quick. Mm-hmm. Get these little short yardage situations, the hitches, the curls, 3-yard drags, the bubble screens. Because once the defense starts collapsing on these short passes, you're going to have Reggie Virgil streaking down the sideline, one-on-one coverage, and he's gone. And then boom, Brett just hits him for a touchdown. And this Toledo cornerback room is very thin this year, especially after the loss of – he's on the Eagles now.
Quinion Mitchell,
thank you.
Yep.
I wanted to say Daquan Finn, but that's their quarterback who's down at Baylor. But they're a much thinner team in the cornerback room now that Quinion Mitchell's gone. I believe they had one or two other cornerbacks transfer out, which is not something you see from Toledo. You don't see a lot of transferring out. You see a lot of transferring in and sticking at that program. So I think the key to the Miami offense is making exactly what you said, making Brett feel comfortable in the pocket.
All right. Well, last thing before we get out of here, I want to get your prediction for Saturday. What is your score prediction? What do you think happens? What are the key plays? What's your ideal? Not ideal. What's your predicted outcome?
Give me 21-17 in favor of the Red Hawks. Okay. I think this is they got to win under their belts, right? They're now no longer playing stress that they don't have a win. They know they can win football games. So I think that's the biggest hurdle in any season, is knowing that you can win a football game. And it's always high-flying, electric offenses when Toledo and Miami take on each other. Last year's bowl game, I think, was 21-17, or it was something in that range. And even the game before that, when Gabbert got hurt, it was 28-21, I think, ended up being the final score. So these teams like playing each other. They like facing off against each other. So I see I'm predicting 21-17 in favor of the Red Hawks. I think Mosey gets a touchdown. I think he has another big rushing touchdown. He's got all the confidence in the world. And I think Gabbert throws probably like a short little slant to McDonald that he's able to break off. And then, of course, a Reggie Virgil deep bomb, or even Andre Johnson deep bomb, one of the two.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say Andre Johnson on a goal line fade.
What's your predictions?
I wrote down earlier. I wrote down 17-13 Miami. I just said it, the Andre Johnson goal line fade, and then the Mosey punching one in. But I think if the defense plays up to their capability, they can slow down this team. They can't slow down this offense, and I think they have to. I think with the way the offense is playing, you have to hold this team to under 20 points to have a chance at winning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have this week. Thank you again for tuning in. Ted, thank you for joining me for week 4.
Yeah. Hey, we'll be back for week 5.
We'll be back for week 5 with the recap of the Toledo game and then previewing. Who do we have next week?
Good question. I've just been focusing on Toledo, taking my own advice, take it a week at a time.
It is Eastern Michigan away. We will not.
Ooh.
We don't have a home game until OU on the 19th.
Wow. All right.
All right. So we'll be back next week with the Toledo recap and the Eastern Michigan preview. Thank you all for joining in. This has been the Red Brick Recap, and we will see you next week.
See you later.